Hello and welcome to another Facebook Live. I've got our good friend Aynsley from Clarity all the way over from the UK. It's nice and early where you are, Aynsley. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, it is a bit early. But as we've discussed before, here that time zones are irrelevant, really, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's 5 a.m. if I'm right for you. And I was saying to you earlier that I started my day at 5 a.m. with Canada calls in Toronto. So yeah, it's the joys of working in this wonderful ecosystem globally. But Aynsley, we're obviously talking about the failure to implement today. So we haven't spoken for probably a little bit over 4 or 5 weeks. So we're always doing these Facebook Lives. Today we're going to cover off failure to implement. What does that actually mean? Like, what are we actually going to be talking about when we're talking about that topic today?
I think from an accounting perspective, because obviously I can bring the accountant perspective as well as the small business owner perspective, because I've kind of switched sides. I think we're going to be talking about the cost of inaction, or the failure to implement and make change stick. I suppose is more than the failure to implement. It's what are the consequences of not taking action? Why do we need to take action? Why do we need to make changes? And yeah, I think ultimately it boils down to what's going to happen to our clients if they don't take action. Because this is two-sided for an accountant, isn't it? We've got the failure to implement from a client's perspective, on what's that going to have an impact on their business, and ultimately the services we provide them. And what does failure implement mean to us as an accounting firm too? So if we don't take action, what impact is that going to have, and why don't we take action, and what are the main sticking points for actually making change stick and acting?
Yeah, and I know that we've done a lot of events together. You obviously did our roadshow in Australia earlier this year before the world got crazy with COVID. And one of the things I always finish up every presentation I do is around, you've learned a lot today, but if you don't implement anything, nothing changes, nothing changes. So we're obviously going to talk about those two aspects. Let's obviously talk about the failure to implement from both sides, the client and from the practice or the business, the accounting business. Where do you see the challenges are with clients' failure to implement? So an accounting firm gives the advice, but there's obviously on the client side, there's inaction, or there's not. They just don't do anything with it.
Yeah, I think that's a number of reasons. So one, I think, is fear. So fear comes from a number of aspects. So fear of failure, maybe fear of the unknown, fear of change. So I think that's the one aspect of not taking action. The other potentially is that they don't understand the value. So they don't know why they need to take the advice that you're giving. Now, it's really funny, isn't it? If you go to a doctor and you tell them your problems, and they give you a prescription, they listen to you and they give you a prescription, rarely do you say, that's probably not really good for me, or that's probably not right for me, I'm going to ignore it. Now, some people might, because they may not want to take course of antibiotics or whatever, but generally when you go to a doctor, you do what's necessary. So it's really unusual in an accounting firm when a client comes to us with a problem, we diagnose it, hopefully, properly, and we come up with a solution that should be the right solution for that client, and they then don't take action. So that's got to be down to, I think, communication. So I think, we always go back to communication, don't we? But I think that's got to be ultimately not explaining properly, or, as I've often said, that accountants jump straight through to solution. So maybe they don't properly explain to the clients why that solution is relevant. They've just jumped straight to, what you need is, and the client's going, really, do I need to? I don't want to pay for that. Why am I paying for that? And I think that's possibly part of the problem. But I think it is fear of failure. And I think from a client's perspective, and this is, I suppose, a problem that I've been banging on for a long time about, is nothing in the world can be created without a plan. So if you think about it, even a piece of art, a piece of music, a building, a engine, a house, anything even structural gets really complicated, but nothing in the world actually gets created without first thinking about it, coming up with a plan and implementing the plan. Yet in business, we seem to just wing it quite often. And this is true for accountants, not just our clients. So why do we think it's acceptable for a small business to not have a business plan? every successful business in the world has a business plan.
It's interesting that, and we were talking about this earlier, one of our major projects for next year is how do we make our clients more successful? So how do we make accounting firms more successful with building a global team? And one of the things that we talked about is obviously getting their team members bought into their firm's vision. But one of the biggest problems we have is that most firms don't have a one-page plan. They don't know where they're going over the next 1, 3 to 5 years. So to be able to have the team member explain, or the business owner explain to the team member, look, this is where we're going and this is where you fit into it, is hard when they don't have it. So I think that, that's naturally it's like a plumber that doesn't fix his own leaky pipes. It's most accountants, may even talk to their clients about it, but they don't actually have this for themselves. So I think if we flip over to the client or the accountant side of it then, so why do you think that a lot of accountants don't, a lot of times they're giving advice, they're getting paid to give advice, and they're giving advice on things, but they're not eating what we call your own dog food. You're not actually doing it yourself. Why do you think a lot of them fail to implement things that they're actually preaching and teaching to their clients?
A big
question.
That's a big question. Well, let's talk accounting specific, I suppose, because we can talk in general about business. So we've talked about the fear, we've talked about fear of failure, lack of focus, lack of understanding, those big issues. Now, I think from a business planning perspective, let's go back to basics, right? Most people think, I haven't got the time for this. So again, time, how often is that thrown back? I don't have the time. So people, I think, get overly complex on planning sometimes. And I think we do this for our clients too. So we say to a client, well, I'm going to do a business plan. It's going to cost you $2,500 or something. And the client's saying, not a chance. Whereas if we do a relevant piece of planning for a relevant size of a client, and sometimes good enough is good enough, then we can probably do a down and dirty plan for maybe 250, 500 and leverage technology. I mean, we know what technology is out there to be able to help us do a business plan. But as accountants, we're so driven on creating complex financial Excel models that maybe we don't offer that service, or we don't do a quick 12-month plan, just a very simple budget for a small business owner. I think that's the same for ourselves too. So we've looked at the complexity of doing probably a proper strategic planning session. The big companies potentially spend, I was talking to somebody from Institute, and they had their financial year is August, and they start planning in February. And they've got to start building the business plans from February onwards. So that's a decent chunk of time planning. So do accountants think, actually, to do this properly, it's going to take me a lot of time? I haven't got that time to do that, so we're just going to continue doing what we've done. I think it's potentially one problem. I think the other problem is there's no sense of urgency here. I think accounting has been moving slowly and slowly and slowly for the last 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah, sure, we've got shiny objects that come in, but in reality, what we do as a profession or industry hasn't changed for who knows how long. And so I think maybe the change is coming in so slowly that people think, it's not going to happen to me, or we can just keep doing what we've done, because this is about, I suppose, maintaining the status quo, the power of just making small changes and tweaks to the business, rather than actually making the change that potentially is necessary, creating that sense of urgency, understanding what's going on to be able to, I suppose, not be the Kodak in our industry.
So what is, I suppose, if we look at obviously we've looked at it from the client side, we've looked at it from the actual business owner point of view, what's the cost of inaction? Like, what is the, I know that you're using Intuit's example. We're very much the same. We run on a calendar year though. So our calendar year starts obviously January, but we've been in business planning since early October. So we probably don't run 6 months, but we run a good process. And I think that it's not just that process, it's then constantly always doing it. But what is the cost of inaction that you've seen particularly with implementing the business advisory type of tools with clients? What's the cost of inaction typically for that?
Well, exactly. So here's the rub, eh? So accountants probably have been making quite a decent sum of money from compliance for a long time. So accounts and tax returns have generated good enough return for many people, and it's been good enough. I think that's that old adage, good is the evil of being great. Not quite the phrase, but you know what I'm trying to say. And I think because of that, people have made money in the past from compliance, and they think, why do I need to get into complex things that I don't really understand, or clients are really not interested? It's a real slog, retraining the team, reselling, and it's just difficult. And we've been told that compliance is dead for 20 years, and it's not. The naysayers are wrong. They're shouting the wrong language. They're telling us falsehoods, and therefore let's not make that change. I think the reality, though, is that we've seen the profits per partner in Australia and New Zealand from studies are showing that they've dropped 41% in the last 5 years. That's whopping. And so that's the starting point, eh? So where is that going? I mean, in the last 6 to 9 months, I know we've talked about this a number of times too. We've talked about the reality that when COVID hit, that some firms charged for the work that they were doing, and some decided to include it in the service because they were offsetting it against one thing or another, or they were standing by their clients, they were doing the right thing. And we don't need to get into the argument or ethical arguments about whether it was right to help or not, or whether it was right to charge or not. That's not really the point here. The point is, this is now gone for 9 months. I don't know what you're seeing in Australia, but I'm certainly seeing in the UK. Steve and I run a mastermind group. We do mentoring for a number of accountants, and those mastermind groups are basically all saying the same thing. Those that even charged or those that didn't charge were still doing a huge amount of work for those clients, maybe not always charging a value price, but charging, let's just get that done and let's charge you something for the sake of it. Those clients have expected that. They've become used to that level of service. They're used to people running around, dropping everything and jumping when they're asking. And accounting firms, whilst they were able to do that for a 3-month period, now can't do that for the long term. Team are getting tired, partners are getting tired, clients are getting grumpy, and it's becoming a really fractious relationship at the moment between both sides. So I'm not sure if that's happening in Australia, but I think that's certainly not managing and implementing change properly. And I think potentially that the level of partner profit is going to drop even lower.
Yeah, look, it's certainly been very similar here. I've seen it's very, good and bad in the industry. I think when you look at how our accountants have dealt with COVID, I've seen, some people have dealt with it really well. They've been able to, have the capacity. They've got enough people. They've been able to manage the work-life balance of their people while things are busy, and versus the people that had major capacity issues and didn't really look at the stuff that they needed to do to run a business. They're running a technician's business, which is I do the job. I don't look at running a business. And I think those ones are struggling. A lot of them have struggled with capacity. They've had to work enormous hours. And I don't think that that's been necessarily the case with the firms that have got their capacity planning, their people strategy and all that right. And a lot of that links back to having very clear visions and business strategy around where we're going and doing. And I think that COVID was, for me, a great thing for the industry in the sense that it's got us talking to clients a lot more. So accounting firms weren't as often. I had one client say to me, Nick, I haven't spoken to all my clients in the last 3 years, let alone I've spoken to them now every month and that was a couple of months ago, 3 months in a row. He said, I'll be doing this when we go back to what was. I'll make sure that I'm doing this because the level of connection I've got is so much deeper. And I mean, people were in default doing advisory during these times. They just didn't know it because advisory is a bit of a dirty word, and it's been bashed by the industry about you need to get away from compliance and get to advisory. Well, no, you don't. I mean, you're probably doing it anyway. It's just you call it something else. So I think that you touched on something that was quite interesting around change management, and this is something. I mean, we've got a big tech team, so within our own business, we've got technology being rolled out and changes and that happening all the time with process and systems, and it's exciting for me. But a lot of our team, we're over close to 1,700 team members globally now, and a lot of them, some of them struggle with this whole change management. You were doing it this way, now you got to do it this way. How do you see that, I suppose, change management piece reflect back into that, what we're talking about with accounting firm owners and clients, and how can accounting practitioners help their clients with change management? Because it's difficult. People don't know what they don't know, and they're changing from what they were doing. We saw this with cloud technology and the adoption of cloud. Obviously, it was too hard because it was a big change management. What's the best advice you've got on helping people to be able to, with that change management?
Yeah, I think the first one is absolutely, I mean, let's deal with this business advisory question first, right? So business advisory is no more complicated than understanding where your client and helping your clients understand this too. So it's you and them working together to understand where they are now, where they want to get to, what the gap is, create a plan to close that gap, and then monitor results versus the plan. That's as simple, that's as complicated and as simple as advisory ever gets. Whether that's time management advisory, whether that's wealth management advisory, whether that's business advisory, whether that's, I don't know, any type of advisory. Every single advisory engagement worldwide, whether it's from Bain consultants right down to small accounting firm in the UK, to help a small business owner, it's understanding where they are now, understanding where they want to get to, calculating the gap, closing the gap, creating a plan to close that gap, and actually measuring and monitoring results versus the plan. So that's about asking the right questions, as you said. It's about speaking to your clients. It's about having a deep understanding of the issues and challenges that they have now, start of problem, the challenge they don't want to have at the end of the problem. What's the difference between the two, and how do we create a plan to actually get from A to B? Simple. So that's any type of planning, and that affects the same from a change management perspective too. So it is about understanding truly the problem as it is now. It's about understanding what's possible in the future, creating that vision. So what's possible? Where are we now? What is possible? What's the difference? How do we close that difference? And then how do we actually measure and monitor the differences we're going along? I think too often in accounting firms, we implemented, partners, and I can say this because I was an accountant, still am an accountant, but ran an accounting firm. We tend to abrogate responsibility rather than delegate properly. So how many times have you heard an accounting firm? So yeah, we've appointed a champion for that. I know that's the term they use in the UK, but maybe it's different in Australia, but it's, we put a champion in place and they're looking after that. And you think, right, so have we given the champion authority? Have we showed them what we're trying, the outcomes we're trying to achieve? Have we showed them the vision of the future? Have we given them targets, and are we measuring and monitoring their targets as we go along? Or have we just abrogated responsibilities, said, we bought this new piece of kit, whatever it might be, fluidity, light, futurely, you name it. Here's a piece of kit, off you go. And that's what tends to happen. So there's no actual change management piece that's put in place. Now, that's really cool. If somebody's looking for a change management process, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a guy called John Cotter, wrote an amazing paper on leading change management, 8 transformation steps, easy peasy. Well, it's not easy peasy, but there's a very beautiful little book that goes with it. I don't know if you've ever come across it. Our Iceberg is Melting. Yeah, so Our Iceberg is Melting is a parable about change management. So it tells the story of penguins. I haven't read it for a long time now. I think it's about penguins living on an iceberg. Their iceberg is melting, but it's been melting very slowly for a long period of time. There's naysayers who say the iceberg isn't melting. There are people who are getting flappy and panicky about what happens if the iceberg does melt. And then there's this whole story about change management. So a really simple parable for people to get and understand. And those 8 steps pretty much cover, I think, what people need to do. But the biggest point of a lot of that is planning for and creating quick wins. And as accountants, we often self-sabotage. So we often go for the more difficult client. Well, if it'll work with this client, then it'll work with every client, rather than going for the quick wins. And if we create quick wins, the team builds confidence, we build confidence in the system or the process or the tool or whatever needs to be put in place. We create stories so that we can share with other people, build confidence, build a coalition of people who are actually going to understand that this is a possible solution for what needs to happen, and then drive through that change management through, I suppose, institutionalizing those changes and those continuous improvements. And I think this feedback loop is critical too, because we've often seen with accountants that they say, oh, it's not good, that doesn't work for me. Well, how would it be if it did work? What would you need to do to make it work? How if we change the status quo rather than accepting it? What if we said, if this were to work, how would I make this happen? And then take small changes, small actions, and this constant feedback loop. So we're looking at it, did it work? No, let's tweak it. Did that make it work? No, let's tweak it again. Or how could we make it better? And it's this, I think, continuous improvement loop that's missing oftentimes as well in accountants.
Yeah, well, look back. I mean, yeah, no, I agree. When I owned it, I had an accounting practice, financial planning for over 12 years. Same thing. It's that constant. Some people were good at changing, and others were not. So, I think that's really where, if you can have a process, a structure, a system, and that in place to do that, it's always a good thing. So, I know that there's been a bunch of things that you've been doing recently. Obviously, that you've launched. I mean, Clarity's been going through some wonderful changes. Been watching from the sidelines. What are are you running? I mean, I saw something the other day that you're not running a webinar anymore. You're running workshops, or I probably completely misworded that. But what are you guys up to at the moment? Like, what's new in your world?
Yeah, so I mean, talk about things moving at a rapid pace and not being able to sometimes, plan yesterday was thrown out the window and we create a new plan today. I mean, that's the problem with planning too, isn't it? That planning needs to be dynamic. It needs to move with the speed that's required for what's happening around you. So I think we've understood the issues and challenges, obviously from an accounting perspective, having been there. We've understood the issues and challenges from small business, having worked from a niche advisory perspective with small businesses for a long time, and we looked at how we could help accountants actually bring this advisory piece to life. So yes, technology helps. Absolutely, it helps because we can leverage technology to do the heavy lifting. But we always need people, and it's always a people-to-people business here. So technology is never going to get rid of people. It's about how we use technology to help those people actually do their work more efficiently and effectively, and to be able to leverage the insights and the crunching of data that absolutely helps us to be able to deal with small businesses. And the processes, obviously, that need to wrap around that. So it's not just about technology and people, it's the systems and processes that enable all of that to happen too. So we looked at how can we put that in place for an accounting firm to enable them either to just start from advisory from the beginning, or to scale advisory, because that's the biggest issue and challenge once you start advisory. How do we then scale it? So we've looked at how we can help them with the implementation perspective from that, and creating Quick Start. We've been creating Quick Start, a 14-day Quick Start program, and a much longer 90-day kind of change management program to help actually make this work and make it happen, because we've seen too many times past that advisory has not hit the mark and people have kind of just got waylaid with it, or they don't understand that they're doing business advisory, as you pointed to, and how do they capture that value, and how do they actually explain that value to their clients, and how do they charge for that value. So it's kind of a two-piece. But a bit on the workshops, absolutely, you're right. So I think we've seen so many events. We can't go to events. I'm not sure if in Queensland you can go to events. Are they events back?
We can do stuff. We're doing an accounting catch-up in a couple of weeks with a bunch of...
Oh, you are so lucky.
Bunch of people in Brisbane. So, yeah, we're lucky in that it's not huge, but, I mean, yeah, you definitely can here. But, yeah, that's in Australia where we are.
We're all going back into lockdown. I mean, it's just crazy here. So yeah, events don't happen here anymore. So we've had to look at how we can make that online experience from an event perspective work, because there's too many, I think, Zoom webinars going on at the moment. They've become, to a penny. Sometimes caliber and quality of the content can be helpful, but it's not, people tend to register for Zoom and watch it in 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And as you said, the power of any idea is only ever in the implementation. So there's no point listening to all these things and taking loads of notes if you don't actually start implementing some of these changes. So what we looked at, how would you create a workshop? So a traditional workshop, how would you create that for an online experience? And it's not just about breakout rooms and Zoom. And that's not what this is about. This is about reimagining, I suppose, the learning, implementation, action, feedback, accountability loop, and how do you create that in a group environment, and how do you create that online? So that's what we've done. We've taken a workshop, broken it up into 4 pieces, and put gaps in between, put group accountability around the edges, and looked at how we could make that learning, implementation, accountability, improvement, loop back, make that really, really tight. So it's all focusing on outcomes rather than about inputs. So it's what do we want people to achieve at the end of the workshop, and how do we go about making that happen during the workshop?
Yeah, excellent. So I know a bunch of our clients and that would be interested in that, and I know that you work closely, obviously, with our North American and ANZ clients. Where can they find out some more info on that?
So there's an event running for UK friendly time zones.
Well, they can dial in. I just have to do it at night time. Like, I mean, I attend events in North America. To be honest, I'm doing an event with Xero tomorrow in North America at 2 a.m. my time. It's nice and early, but you know, it's the things you do to help educate and be there for the market. So if anyone wanted to attend these events, they are UK time zone. But what's the best way for them to be able to come?
Yeah, if they want to contact me, or Amy, actually, amy.hayes@clarity-hq.com. There are landing pages, so it is across our social media. Obviously, that's an easy way to get in touch with. If they want to contact Amy Hayes, amy.hayes@clarity-hq.com, we can make sure they get on the right program. We do have a more friendly time zone for Oz coming up as well in November. So there are a number of time zones. We're obviously trying to cover the US as well, as you do. So it's split across, so that there will be more friendly time zones. Yeah, I would like you. I mean, we're always in the wrong time zone. And so if you want to attend the event, and if it's really important, and if it's going to add value to my business, then I'll go to it. It doesn't matter what time it is. I will have to get up. I know it's probably easier for some.
Yeah, well, one of my mates, he runs one of the biggest payroll companies in New Zealand, and I was chatting to him the other day, and because I saw him posting, he basically attended an event that was a 2 a.m. start, and it went through to 10 a.m. In Australia. So he was up doing the event, and I said to him, I said, mate, that's keen. He goes, what successful people don't keep learning. He goes, I've just exited a really successful business. I got a good paycheck, but he goes, if I'm not continuously learning, I'm not going to be able to continue to be better to serve our clients. And I just thought it was a great reminder, the dedication of someone that's, you know, built a significant business, exited it, built another one, exited it, and then after that has been able to still keep learning and refreshing and you know, continuously trying to become a better person so he can serve his clients better. So, you know, if the content's, you know, strong enough, people should have the will to do it. And I think that's one of the challenges. So we're going to have to wrap up in a second, but we obviously spoke about today. The theme of today was around the failure to implement. What final words do you want to give our listeners that have been very patient with us, and you and I can talk forever, and the people have been listening to us? So any final words that you want to give them, or any tips we talked about obviously the cost of inaction, the failure to implement, to actually walk away and implement after today?
Well, I think I've seen some of the comments coming through, and we haven't dealt with comments because you and I can talk for all the time. I've seen some comments coming through about real life practical issues here from a tax perspective, from a tax practice. I think what we're trying to do here is give an overview of the big challenge. I mean, to go into practicalities and nitty gritty of particular circumstances for a tax practice, I think what we're trying to do is just here we be here all day. I mean, that's a day course. Absolutely, come and talk to us about outcomes for you, outcomes for who, outcomes for you, outcomes for your clients. We're talking about how do I put this in place in the real world? What are you talking about? Real world issues? Well, that's a day. That's probably a 4-day boot camp. In fact, actually, is that what that's about? So I'm sorry, I can't deal with the nitty gritties of exactly the issues and challenges. We've talked around them from an accounting firm, which is they often appoint a champion rather than actually creating a strategy, creating a plan, getting the team on board, explaining the vision of the future, wrap everybody around that vision, and then helping take small steps that you can make quick wins to be able to build confidence and build the stories to then be able to take the next bigger steps, which is actually driving change and moving forward. So that's as much as probably the depth we can get into today from that perspective. So I hope it answers that question that keeps coming up about practicalities for accounting and tax practices. I think the biggest, I suppose, advice I would give somebody from a lack of inaction is to absolutely go back to basics and look at what they want to achieve as a business. So what absolutely is your vision for the future? What are you looking for? And sometimes people can't envision a future, so let's cost that future. Let's look at take yourself forward 5 years. Where do you want to be living? How many holidays do you want? What cars do you want to be driving? Where do you want to be sending the kids to school? Map out that what do I want in 5 years' time and cost it. And look at where you are now and look at what you want in 5 years' time and look at that gap. What does the business need to do to be able to deliver what you're looking for? And how is that 5-year plan? Is Is it too big? Do we need to break it down into 12 monthly steps? How do you climb a mountain one step at a time? This is about breaking the project down and making smaller steps and breaking year one into 12 steps and seeing if that's achievable. Does that really look realistic? So I think, Nick, it's about going back to basics. It's about understanding what you want for your business, what you want for your firm, what you want for your life, and how is the business going to be able to make that happen?
Yeah, I love that, and you'll be happy to know Trent from Teach It Forward, who's a business coach that we work with. I think you met him on the roadshow actually earlier this year, and one of the things that him and I have done some Facebook Lives, and one of the most critical steps he does when he coaches accounting firms is create what he calls a clarity plan, which is what do they want? Like, what as an owner do you want? Is it to work 4 days a week? Is it X amount of money? What is it? So yeah, mate, really appreciate your tips and tricks and content today, as always. For those that have listened, if you don't implement anything, then you've spent half an hour with us and you would have got lots of bits and pieces, but please take something away and implement. Aynsley, appreciate you getting up extremely early in the UK. I know it's 5 a.m. or just after now. So appreciate your time today and look forward to continuing to do more of these in the future.
Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate it.
All right, chat soon. Take care, mate.
Okay.